Circuit, but don't do it again, because that's not the law. And that resolved that issue. Who had a hand up? Sonny, I'm sorry.
So, after a case is heard by the Supreme Court,
Yes.
by the Louisiana, is that the final, or can it then go into the federal?
Excellent question. In rare instances, you might be able to go from here to here. But the majority of cases that go up through the state court system are matters of state law. So contracts law is a matter of state law, not federal law. Divorce, child custody, child support, all matters of state law, not federal law. So because most cases that come up through the state courts involve state laws, the Supreme Court of the United States is usually going to say, nah, that's not our thing. We don't cover that. Unless what you're arguing is a particular state law passed by the state of Louisiana is, for example, unconstitutional under the federal constitution.
Big border rights.
Right, exactly. This guy says, this court says, no problem. These guys go, yeah, they did it right. That's not unconstitutional. These guys say, yeah, it's okay, it's not unconstitutional. You can take your shot and file this petition for writ of cert with the Supreme Court and see if they'll hear the case. Doesn't happen often that they agree to take it, but again, because they handle cases, they do tend to take cases arising under the Constitution. You might have your option there.
Yeah, question. The Supreme Court's are appointed to a lifetime appointment. What about the U.S. Circuit of Appeals?
Also, lifetime appointment, as are the United States District Court judges.
So how are they, same process?
Exact same process. Nominated by the president, have to be approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, which holds the hearings, and then voted on by the whole Senate. And it's the same process. The only way to get rid of them is to impeach them, and there are very limited reasons for doing it. We had a judge impeached off the Eastern District not long after I started practicing law, because he was basically finding a way to steal money from the court. And they found like this wad of cash hidden in his desk drawer. So the guy obviously wanted to be caught. I mean, it was like the dumbest thing ever, but that's one situation. You know, so the federal judge who murders his wife because she won't give him a divorce, yeah, he's going to be impeached. But it's got to be big stuff like that. Question?
I'm curious, why is the Fifth District the most conservative? They're all.
Oh, I don't know. You know, we're down here in the good old South.
No,
What
no,
can I tell you?
But if they're appointed by presidents, I mean, you know.
Well, it's kind of hard to say. I will tell you this. There are a number of women who sit on the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, and the absolutely most anti-female, worst sex harassment opinion I've ever read, written by a judge, was written by a woman judge on the U.S. Fifth Circuit. The plaintiff's case involved allegations of, this woman worked in an industrial setting, so she worked in a kind of male-dominated environment, and they hazed her and razzed her and threatened her like crazy. In other words, you're taking a guy's job. You need to get out of here. You're taking a job away from a man. You don't need to be doing this kind of job. Get out. You're a woman. They called her a dyke. They called her everything they could think of. They scrawled horribly obscene things on her locker. They told her they were going to follow her. A number of people were going to follow you to your car one night. We're going to rape you. You better get out of here. We're warning you. Do this. Threats, 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 threats. She lived in fear for her life half the time. She brings a lawsuit because the employer wouldn't do anything about it. And the suit got thrown out by the U.S. District Court. She appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, which says, in a decision written by a woman named Eve Jones, who I would just love to meet in a dark alley one day. And she says, yeah, you know this kind of stuff, that kind of behavior she's accusing her male co-workers of, that doesn't rise to the level of sex harassment. No, it's more like, attempted sexual assault, but that's not good enough, right? Eve Jones, yeah, we don't have a lot of sex harassment. We don't have a lot of discrimination in the Fifth South, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. Yeah, there's not a lot of discrimination in any of those states in the context of employment or anything else, is it? It's insane, but it just is. And historically, I don't know how they keep getting these ultra-conservative judges nominated, but it is what happens. And then when they get there, most of them become even more conservative than they were before, with one exception. There's a judge on the Fifth Circuit named James Dennis. Judge Dennis used to be on the Louisiana Supreme Court, and Dennis was a renowned liberal. Everybody knew, you know, if you were on the liberal side of the case, you were thrilled if Justice Dennis was going to be the guy hearing your case, because you knew you'd probably be getting a really super fair hearing. But he went up to the Fifth Circuit. 90% of the time, he's the lone wolf, he's the dissent. He's the guy that goes, yeah, I don't agree with my comrades over here. I would have gone the other way. And I don't know how he survives, frankly. I would have jumped out of one of those windows by now or thrown Edith Jones out of one anyway. But don't tell her if you see her. Don't use my name. She's horrible. She's absolutely horrible. What's that? Yeah, yeah, and she's been wreaking havoc with the laws of this country ever since. In fact, she was embroiled in some kind of controversy in the last couple of years where she was on a panel speaking at a university. I want to say it was like some essentially racist comment, and students in the audience went crazy, you know, tweeting it and texting it, and like, I can't believe she said this, and the press went after her at a point later, and she, of course, tried to explain it away and said she doesn't have a racist bone in her body, you know, yeah, okay. Whatever the comment was, you can Google Edith Jones and racist comment if you want to see what it was, and I'm probably going to do that too, because I'm not remembering the specifics of it, but she's just, I don't even know who she is. I can't talk about it. She makes my blood boil. She really does, because it's just like ridiculous. You know, there's never been a legitimate discrimination claim that came through the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal. It just, every case, no, 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 no.
It's such a common sense ruling, that what was her end game? Why would she rule in that fashion?
If what was a common sense rule?
It seemed like it was straightforward to the point.
Oh, which one, about the woman?
Yeah.
She just, the Fifth Circuit is notoriously hostile to discrimination and harassment complaints. They don't like it. Why? Because they think those laws are unnecessary. Because they clog up the federal court system. And really what most of those, this is the kind of stuff they'll say. Most of those cases are really about people who just can't get along with each other. And the courts have no business trying to control what goes on in a workplace. That's up to the employer to do something about it. If the employer chooses not to do something about it and the person feels like they're really being discriminated against, well, they get a remedy, quit your job and go find another one. And that's the explanation. These cases, most of the time, they're frivolous lawsuits, there's no merit to them, and that's just how she feels. So, you know, if you're being harassed or discriminated against in your job, well, you got options, quit, go somewhere else. And that's what she thinks, that's why she thinks these laws are completely unnecessary. There aren't a whole lot of people, even other conservatives on the Fifth Circuit, that agree with that premise, but it is this sort of built-in bias, and it really affects their decisions in a lot of instances. So, okay, so we're going to talk in the few minutes we have left here about probably one of the slightly more complex, or at least involved, issues, and that is the issue of jurisdiction. So, a simple definition of the term jurisdiction is the power or authority of a court to hear and decide a case. The power and authority of a court hear and decide a case. So you might gather from that definition that not every court has the authority to hear every case. Some courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. That means they only hear certain kinds of cases. So in some states, though not in Louisiana, there's a separate set. There are offshoots from the state district court. So some states have a separate set of state district courts that handle family law cases. Over here on the federal side, one type of district court or subset of the district courts is the bankruptcy court. Clearly, they're called the bankruptcy court because that's all they hear, are bankruptcy cases. So if you need to file a petition for bankruptcy, you don't go to the state courts because bankruptcy is a matter of federal law, and you don't even go to the U.S. district courts. You go to this very specialized U.S. district court called the United States Bankruptcy Court. And that's where your whole bankruptcy matter will be handled.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Is there an instance where there's some law that's governed by both the state and the federal?
Yes, there are, and we're going to talk about that too. That's got its own little type of jurisdiction called concurrent jurisdiction. We'll talk about that in just a minute. If you live in a state that has a separate group of state district courts that handle only family law matters, and you want to file a petition for divorce, that's where you have to go. And if you have to file a lawsuit about your neighbor's dog chewing up your fence, you don't go to the family law court. That's not a family law matter, right? So these guys are courts of limited jurisdiction. They only have the authority or the power to hear certain kinds of cases. So this word comes from the Latin, and it literally means to speak the law. So it means that courts in our system, in our governmental system, the courts have the power to speak the law, to speak on the law, to pronounce what the law is, to make those decisions. And that's what jurisdiction is all about. Jurisdiction is a prerequisite to any court hearing any kind of case. In other words, a court that does not have jurisdiction over a case, but goes ahead and hears that case anyway, that court's decision, their judgment is thrown out. The court must have the power or the authority to hear a case. And courts will know whether they have the power or the authority to hear a case because of laws that confer that power and authority on certain courts. So there are statutes that say these kinds of cases must be heard by, or you must file a case for breach of contract in the state district court located in the state where and in the parish where the contract is signed, for example. If it's a motor vehicle accident, the courts in the state where the accident took place always have jurisdiction over a case involving that accident, simply because the accident took place within that court's geographic boundary, that state's geographic boundaries. So there are, for us to start off with, we're going to talk about three basic types of jurisdiction. A court, to hear a case, must have subject matter jurisdiction, or jurisdiction over the subject matter involved in the case. There's something else called in rem jurisdiction, and then the courts must have personal jurisdiction, or jurisdiction over the parties. So the court has to have jurisdiction over the subject matter of the lawsuit. So again, subject matter would be like if it's a divorce, does this court have the power to hear divorce cases? Does it have power over that kind of subject matter? This is required. A court that hears a case and issues a judgment in a matter that it does not have jurisdiction to hear that kind of case, that judgment is null and void. It's thrown out. It's useless. So subject matter jurisdiction means, again, the court has to have the authority to hear this kind of case, breach of contract, personal injury, whatever it might be. In rem jurisdiction is a nice, simple little rule. This word, this is from the Latin. It's the objective case of the Latin word res, which means the thing. So in rem jurisdiction involves cases that involve a dispute over property, land or buildings. Any state, let me back that up. The courts of a state, of any state, always have jurisdiction or authority to hear cases involving property located within that state's boundaries, right? Just like they have the authority to hear cases involving accidents that take place within that state. They have the authority always to hear a case involving property located within that state's borders. So if you live in Louisiana, you got a sibling who lives in Georgia, your grandmother died, and left the two of you as co-owners of a piece of property grandma owned in Mississippi. The two of you hate each other, do not want to co-own this piece of property. You don't get along, it's just going to make trouble. So you suggest to your sibling, why don't we go ahead and put the property up for sale, split the money, and go on our way. Your sibling goes, I'm not doing that. You're like, okay, but, what are we going to do? Are we going to put some building on the property and rent it? Are we just going to let the land sit there? I mean, we could be making some money off of this. I don't care, I'm not doing anything. You say black, I say white. You say yes, I say no. Leave me alone. So you decide this isn't going to work. So you file suit to have a court order that the property be sold and the proceeds from the sale, the money from the sale, be divided equally between you and your sibling. You have to file a suit because your sibling isn't willing to do that voluntarily. The courts of Mississippi have jurisdiction over that lawsuit. Even though you live in Louisiana and your sibling, the defendant, lives in Georgia, because the property that you're arguing about or fighting about is in Mississippi, you can file your lawsuit in Mississippi. Okay, and we're going to get into some of those rules. It gets a little tricky about, depending on what the type of case is, where does the suit have to be brought? We're getting ready to talk some about some of that, and we'll talk more about it next week as well. So the last one is personal jurisdiction. And this one involves, does the court have jurisdiction over the defendant in the lawsuit, over the person of the defendant? Meaning, does this court have the authority to hear a case brought by the plaintiff against this defendant? So here are some of the issues. Jurisdiction over the person of the plaintiff, that's never an issue. Because by virtue of the fact that the plaintiff goes into this court in Hancock County, Mississippi, and files a lawsuit, that means you are voluntarily submitting yourself to the authority of the Mississippi court, right? Because you chose to file your lawsuit there, okay? So you walked voluntarily into the courthouse in Hancock, Mississippi, you pay your money, you file your lawsuit. That court has jurisdiction over you, the plaintiff who filed that suit, because you gave it jurisdiction just because you filed your suit there. So there can't be any argument. You can't file your suit in Hancock, Mississippi, and then come back 6 months later and go, oh, I object to your jurisdiction. What the hell? You conferred the jurisdiction on us. You can't object to it. You're the one who gave us the jurisdiction, so get out of here. But the defendant in a lawsuit, that person doesn't want to be there. They didn't pick the fight, right? They didn't file the suit, they're getting sued. Find me a person in the world who thinks being sued is a great idea and is lots of fun and can't wait to go to the courthouse and fight it out. Nobody does. Nobody wants to be a defendant in a lawsuit. You don't want that. So, issues of fairness arise in the context of the defendant is not a voluntary participant in this litigation game, doesn't want to be there. So the courts have to really take a hard look at, do we have a right to make that defendant come into this courthouse and defend this lawsuit? So here's how it really arises. I'm from Louisiana, you're from Georgia, we're both vacationing in the panhandle of Florida, and we get into an accident in Pensacola, Florida, or at Pensacola Beach.